morning. Congratulations to everyone that got daylight savings time correct. I woke up in a panic at about 5 o'clock in the morning. Didn't remember if I had changed my clock yet or not. Had to grab my phone. Started questioning whether the phone was right. It's a crazy time of year. So for those who don't know me, I'm TJ Neilio. If this doesn't go well, continuing with a tradition that was recently established, then my name is Jared James. Is he here? It'll be funnier when he sees that. Maybe he's watching. Or I was thinking about introducing myself as Bishop, saying that I'm losing my hair. It's been a while since I've been here. I dropped about 6 inches, and I shaved the mustache. Okay, getting right into it. So I have a lot of things to say today, and I appreciate your attention. If there's a couple of things I want you to walk away from this message, I'm going to tell you right up front, so we'll get that out of the way. First is, I want you to understand what real value is. And it's a big concept. There's a lot that falls into it. And you've heard it. Bishop has done a great job teaching this over the years. All the pastors, everybody touches on it. It's really fundamental to the Christian faith. But I'm going to give a little bit of a different perspective. And then we're going to talk about what real love is, just briefly at the end. So real value. Interesting thing about value, let's talk about the definition of value. So by the dictionary, value is the importance, the worth, or the usefulness of something. The importance, the worth, or the usefulness of something. And if you're not familiar with the last message that I gave, if you don't know me, I'm passionate about apologetics. Christian apologetics, the defense of the Christian faith. I love to get into deep philosophical topics, deep things that make you think for weeks on end, that drive me crazy. I've read chapters of books 10, 12 times to try to understand some of these concepts, but it's a passion of mine. So I come from the perspective of speaking to skeptical people. And going forward into the Easter season, I think this is a critical element for us because Christianity in general is about to get a lot of free advertising. There's going to be things in the news. It's going to be talked about. Everyone knows Easter time is coming. So are we prepared to answer some of the big questions that come up? And how do we talk about our faith? So that underlies what I'm going to be speaking about today when I talk about real value. So the importance, the worth, or the usefulness of something. Probably the most fundamental topic that comes with talking about your faith comes down to why human beings have value. And I want you to understand not only why we have value, but why is it important that you know how to explain that to someone else? Because we can easily just say, well, we have value because we believe in God. God gives us value. And if that's the end of the conversation, then we're going to leave people wanting. But there's more. So let's dig into a little bit. Nothing has value unless something transcendent gives it value. Okay, nothing has value unless something transcendent gives it value. And transcendence is a church term. It's used quite frequently. You're not going to be at work and someone's going to say, well, that PowerPoint was transcendent. So let's talk about what it means. Transcendence, according to the dictionary, means beyond or above, existing apart from, higher than. Beyond or above, existing apart from, or higher than. So how does that relate to value? Nothing in our world has value unless something above it, beyond it, higher than it, gives it value. You could apply that to anything in your life. Money, diamonds, cars, material things, or even non-material things. Nothing that you can think of has value unless something apart or greater than it gives it value. And this is something that the world just understands. The world understands that, but they don't really know why they understand it that way, right? It's just ingrained in each one of us, and we have to call it out. Let's go to our Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. This is not a religious document. This is the Declaration of Independence This was a group of people declaring independence and the establishment of America. What does it say? It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. In other words, obvious. Obvious to us. It becomes obvious to ourselves. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator, capital C. Interesting that in a non-religious text you would have that kind of a statement. What does it mean to be endowed? Endowed means established or provided with ability by their Creator. So in a secular document, the establishment of America, we have a recognition of our value, that all of mankind was created equal, and we're given ability, or we're endowed, we're established, not by each other, but by the Creator. There's the value claim right there in our declaration. So what will skeptical people say? And just to define terms a little bit, when I talk about skeptical people, I would classify myself as a skeptical person, but not in this sense. I'm talking about people that don't know the Christian message, or people that are aware of the Christian message and reject it. People that don't believe God exists, or people that don't want to believe God exists. Those people that try to corner you with difficult questions and try to get you to not have an answer. I bucket them all together, skeptics, just for the purposes of this. But it's interesting, when you talk to people that are skeptical about the faith, they borrow from the faith to mock the faith. And we need to start calling them out on it. But we have to recognize that. So what I want to establish here today, I want you to take away, how do you start conversations with folks when it comes to value? Everything boils down to value. But how do we do it? What are some practical examples? See, my wife always talks about the messages that we hear, and she says, oh, I love that. But how? How do I do that? How is it actually practical? So in honor of that, I'm going to give you some examples. So when you're speaking to folks that I might consider skeptical, they're going to say things like, we should donate to charity. They're going to say things like, we should help those that are less able to help themselves. Maybe some folks have a handicap. No one's going to argue that they shouldn't be helped or that they're not deserving of help. No one's going to argue that you shouldn't give to charity. You shouldn't help those around you. This is my favorite one. Why do bad things happen to good people? That statement has two value judgments in it. One, bad things, and two, good people. And yet they make this statement, and they have no way of establishing what's a bad thing and who's a good person. But we let them get away with it. We don't know. It's a mystery. No, it's not. We should have an answer. What do atheists say? It's a specific bucket of skeptics that specifically and aggressively, not all, but many, aggressively do not believe, or they believe there is no God. Not just a matter of I don't know. It's they actively believe there is no God. Here's an example of an atheist philosopher writing, equality is a lie concocted by inferior people who arrange themselves in herds to overpower those who are naturally superior to them. The morality of equal rights is a herd morality, and because it opposes the cultivation of superior individuals, it leads to the corruption of the human species. Wow. Where do you think, if people believed in that, where do you think that writing would lead? Interestingly enough, Pastor Mike knows the answer. He's cheating. Nietzsche wrote those words, and they were presented to world leaders by none other than Adolf Hitler. This was the fundamental belief that he had. Because there is no, in his worldview, there is no true value, right? There is no transcendent being that gives us value. You can make it up. And when you can make it up, this is where you go. No matter what you do, all roads lead to this philosophy. And anything else borrows from our faith. Can I be so bold as to say that? But see, it goes beyond that. Because you can have value because God gave you value. And we're going to talk about how a Christian worldview explains that. But how do you value yourself? Do we even value ourselves? Are you even open to receive the value that you actually have? See, human beings are unique in many, many, many ways. And you're going to hear the scientific community saying that we share 94% of our DNA with a banana. You'll hear them make all kinds of crazy claims. And yeah, God created us out of the same material He created the world. So you shouldn't be surprised that we have an awful lot in common with our nature around us. It does say that in Genesis. And after hundreds of years of scientific research, they're just catching on. But it does say that in Genesis. But how do you value yourself? I want to talk about 4 ways, and I'm borrowing this from outline from Ravi Zacharias, who is a Christian apologist and a speaker around the world. If you're not familiar with his ministry and you like the idea of apologetics, I encourage you to check him out. He's pretty incredible. And what he says about the Christian worldview, providing an explanation for human value in 4 categories. The first one is the creation. We've touched on it already. God created humanity. Okay? There is implicit worth in every human being. We all have essential value. And I'm going to go so far as to say that the Judeo-Christian worldview, our faith, is the only faith in the world where God created us in His likeness. That's a tremendous amount of value. That's a tremendous thing to say. God created humanity. I'm going to make another statement about this too. If you see yourself any less valuable than God intended, that's sin. Straight up. You got a lot of excuses. We all have a lot of excuses. I'm working on things in my life. We're all working on things in our own lives. But at the end of the day, if you don't see yourself as valuable as God sees you, that's sin. Period. And sin leads to a lot of things. So we need to get this straight. We need to understand our value. Genesis 1:27. If you're not familiar, so God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them. So the Christian worldview's perspective on human value breaks up into 4 sub-bullets. The first one, creation. The second one, the incarnation. God didn't just create human beings and then set us off, go have fun. No. God took the flesh. It says in the Gospel of John, the Word became flesh. It says in Philippians 2, He humbled Himself and became human. He humbled Himself and became human. We're talking about the person of Jesus. We're talking about something so unique to the Christian faith that God would actually become human to establish things for us. Jesus came to serve and to teach and to show us what morality is and to show us love. There's an awful lot there. I have to keep moving along here, but let's talk about morality for a minute, because that's another thing. I have conversations with a lot of my coworkers, and I do say things. I have to say I instigate, but I do it for fun, and also I do it because I'm trying to sharpen myself. I want to expose myself, and I want them to try to find holes in my thinking. So I do throw things out there. When people say, God bless you, I say, oh, thank you. God bless you too. When I sneeze. Those are excuses. Those are ways that you can bring up faith. When something really terrible happens, they say, oh, sending good vibes your way. Good vibes, folks. Vibes is what we're all about, vibes. But when we talk about good and bad and evil and suffering, we're talking about morality. See, if somebody says, that event that took place at the school, that was evil. That was bad. Those were innocent people. You have to ask them, why? Why was it evil? I know why I think it's evil, but why do you think it's evil? And just let them answer, because, we're not the only ones to answer questions. Everybody has to answer questions. So if somebody makes a statement that says, that bad thing happened to good people, innocent people, it shouldn't have happened, they should or shouldn't, really? Who's to say what should or shouldn't happen? Why is that evil? See, and this is commonly used by a lot of apologists, but just to illustrate the example. If you believe that there's such a thing as good and evil, then you believe that the other one exists. So if you believe there's such a thing as evil, you have to admit that there's such a thing as good. And if you believe that there's such a thing as good, then you have to believe that there's a moral law on the basis of which to differentiate between the two. There is some standard, right? You can't say that that was good or bad, and then what if I disagree with you? What if I think that's exactly what should happen? You'd say, you're crazy, you're wrong. But says who? Says what? Who's teaching? What are you talking about? And if you believe that there's a moral law, then there has to be a moral lawgiver. There has to be something transcendent, above, beyond, apart from, that creates and establishes that moral law. See, there's something intrinsic, there's something inside of each one of us. We don't talk about it in the world all that much, but torturing little children is wrong. I don't care where you are. And I don't care who you are. I don't care what ism you attach to your faith. It doesn't matter. It's wrong across the board. We call that, in the Christian worldview, our moral law. That there is good and there is evil. And there is a moral lawgiver. And people often say, well, why does there have to be a moral lawgiver? Why can't there just be that thing in each one of us? It comes from the idea of survival of the fittest. Killing people is wrong because it stops the human race from propagating. Is that right? So why should I help a disabled person? Why should I help somebody with a serious mental impairment? Why do they have dignity and value? And someone that doesn't believe in God, they won't know why they disagree with that statement. They'll say, well, of course they do, but they don't know why. A real atheist should say they don't. A real atheist should follow their worldview all the way through to its logical conclusion, and that will cause them to say things that you heard Nietzsche say. And we all know that that's wrong, and nobody wants to be associated with that label. They want to steal from the Christian message. They want to steal love and compassion and equal rights, but they don't know why that's the case. So the Christian worldview, why do human beings have value? 4 reasons. 1, the creation. God created us. 2, he became flesh. He became man, the incarnation. Number 3, the transformation. What happens when we're transformed? The old dies and the new is born. See, the human heart is desperately wicked, described by many of that way. And when you look around the world, it's tough to argue with that. But see, the Christian message is a different message. The Gospel of John is a great illustration of, in order to find oneself, you have to lose oneself. It's an interesting concept. What does an atheistic philosopher say about morality and transformation? They say that, pure reason could never get you to morality. Just thinking about the most logical response will never lead you to the moral response. And that's a big difference. That's a big difference. So the Gospel of John, to find oneself, you need to lose oneself. We spend tons of money, time, energy, searching for fulfillment. You ever think about why you desire what you desire? Some of us do. Does everybody? Think about why you have the desires you have for material things? So transformation, there's a funny part about transformation. In the context of church, it's always a good thing. It's great. I was, and now I am. And it's always better, right? I've been transformed through Christ. I've been transformed through this experience that now my eyes have been opened. But there's a difficult battle that comes along with that. A couple difficult battles. One is your coworkers remember you pre-transformation. And they're not going to be shy about reminding you of that. They're going to say things like they say to me. Oh, I remember when you used to. Oh, that person's still in there. You're just suppressing it. Yeah, it is still in there. Because the human heart is wicked. But they are leaving it just where they are. They're living and bathing in that world. We've been transformed. So I take those statements as an affirmation of my transformation. Thank you for reminding me who I was, because that helps paint the contrast to who I am today. Thank you for reminding me of what I used to do. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I appreciate you remember that, because now watch me. Now watch me. I got a tweet opportunity. Transformation in the Christian worldview doesn't mean you lose your history. It means you use your history. I'm not normally a fan of cute Christian phrases, but I couldn't help that one. Romans 8:28, for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. Half the people I interact with would probably not feel the same way if I couldn't relate to where they are in their life, if I had never been there. So God creates humanity. God becomes humanity. The transformation in each one of us. And then the last one, the consummation. What does consummation mean from the dictionary? The point at which something is complete. The point at which something is complete. Our society is searching for completeness. We're searching for the age-old find unity and diversity. The word university comes from that. And there's an amazing quote from Archbishop William Temple, and I'm going to first read it to you. It's meaty. There's an awful lot, so you're not going to get all of it the first read, but then we're going to put it up on the screen after, and we're going to go through it. So try to stay with me. It's a long one. See, the consummation, the point at which something becomes complete, in the Christian worldview, that's really our worship. That's really our worship of God, our recognition of God's position in our lives, and our worship of him for that. Okay? So what does Archbishop William Temple say? Worship is the submission of all our nature to God. It is the quickening of conscience by his holiness, nourishment of mind by his truth, purifying of imagination by his beauty, opening of the heart to his love, submission of will to his purpose. All this gathered up in adoration is the greatest expression of which we are capable. Let's go through that. If we could put that up. Archbishop William Temple. Worship is the submission of all our nature to God. See, a lot of times we feel like worship is just the slow songs at the beginning of service. Worship, you got to put on a track, get quiet, close your eyes. That's worship. And I'll tell you, that's an element of worship. But what is worship in totality? What does Archbishop William Temple say? He was Archbishop of Canterbury, 1940s. A very interesting life, if you have an opportunity to go read about Archbishop William Temple. But he says, it's the quickening of conscience by his holiness. Each one of these could be a sermon. I'm going to fly through them, so feel free to take and really dive into this later. There's a lot online about it. The quickening of conscience by his holiness, the measurement of our conviction against God's example. See, that's what we're talking about here. That's what we're talking about. Value has to have a reference point. Our morality has to have a reference point, that foundation. So worship is the quickening of conscience by his holiness, nourishment of our mind by his truth. If you sent your kids to school or you took a class and they taught you lies, you wouldn't consider that much nourishment. If something's not true, it's not nourishment to your mind. Truth is nourishment to your mind. But there's a lot of lies out there. There's a lot of lies out there. So our worship is the nourishment of mind by his truth, purifying of imagination by his beauty. One statistic I have to throw out there, I can't help it. There's a Christian watchdog agency called Covenant Eyes that runs a survey on the adult entertainment industry and how it is affecting America. And 2 years ago, they did a study, self-identified non-Christian men. So men that identify themselves as being non-Christian. They self-identify as being non-Christian. How many of them do you think visit an adult entertainment site on either a mobile device or a computer at least once a month? I would consider that frequently, but I'm sure we all have different reference points for that, but at least once a month. 65% non-Christian men will frequent an adult entertainment product once a month, at least. Now, let's flip it to self-identified Christian men, those that say they're Christ followers. What percentage of Christian men do you think same, at least once per month? Any guesses? So it's 65% for non-Christian men. Christian men, 64%. We're doing good, 1 percentage point. That's a rounding error as far as I'm concerned. That's a rounding error. If there's 1,500 people in this room and half are men, just to put this out there, that's 480 of you. 480 of you. At least once a month. If you break down the statistics to, once a day, it's shocking. We're not going to go there. But part of our worship is the purifying of our imagination by his beauty. That's part of our worship. Opening of heart to his love. Do you value yourself? Is your heart open enough to receive the tremendous love that God is pouring out? There's so much to talk about here. I have to keep going. And I even roll my eyes when people say that, but now I'm just one of them. It's so true. Oh my goodness. No matter what we do, we'll never be able to kill the need for worship in our human experience. Whether you believe in God or you don't, whether you're a skeptic or not, the question is not, are you worshiping? The question is only, what are you worshiping? See, the word worship turns a lot of people off in the secular community, right? It's going to turn a lot of people off because it's got a lot associated with it. So you can call it whatever you want. We call it worship. And the Archbishop's 5 points: the submission of all our nature, quickening of conscience, nourishment of mind, purifying of imagination, opening of the heart, and the biggest one, submission of will to his purpose. Boy, is that not easy. But all of this gathered up in adoration is the greatest expression of which we're capable. See, I get a lot from people that, I want to live free. I'm progressive. I want freedom. I don't want all your rules. I don't need all your rules. I love this quote from G.K. Chesterton. He says, whenever you remove any fence, always pause long enough to contemplate why it was put there in the first place. So you can go around breaking down rules and ignoring things, but you should pause long enough to understand, why was that boundary established in the first place? It's not random, folks. These are not random principles. These were not man-made. We have explanations for these things. What do our skeptical friends say? How do they explain these things? We should be asking these questions. So I'm going to transition because, we talk about value. The first thing that you think about, first thing I think about, maybe, money. Money is associated with value, right? In our culture, it's a pretty big deal. And so let's talk about money. I love money management. That's like a hobby of mine. I enjoy it. I love talking about it. I love, in my house, the B word is budget. And my wife and I are on the same page, right? We just love to budget. If we have a free evening, you know what? Let's go over the budget again. Let's see where we could shave on the expenses. Oh, it's been a couple of months since I called the cable company and tried to negotiate a lower rate. Let me do that again. Let me go threaten to cancel and see if they'll give me a discount. By the way, if you're not doing that, I can't tell you to do it, but I will say it's highly effective. Danielle will tell you, I absolutely love doing that. Who doesn't love to get a good deal? Well, I love money management. I do. I really enjoy it. I love talking about it. I love getting into it. I love the challenge of it. I love the burn of a budget. I do. I love it. Oh, I already spent that much this month. Oh, I got to wait till next month. And there I am, April 1st, in line at Dunkin' Donuts. I got my budget back. I love it. She's laughing because that's what we do. Oh, we're almost out of groceries this month. Can we just make rice for dinner? We have rice in the cabinet. But there's an element of money management and finances that the secular community has a problem with. They say, I'm good. I actually had a person say this to me, a skeptic, does not believe in God, say to me, I agree with a lot of your church talk, but as soon as you ask me for money, I'm out. Really? If God is so powerful, why does he need my money? Tell me we haven't thought that at least once. Let me answer the question. God doesn't need your money. The UI does. The people that labor to pave the parking lot do. And the people that created and manufactured the chairs you're sitting on, they need it too for their families. And if you want to spread the word, the gospel to the world, that's tough. And if you want to take advantage of technology, that costs money. Because I'm telling you right now, the services for this church, they're not free. Cameras are not free. Nothing's free except the love of God. So, how do you start tithing? Because I know I'm battling the clock. So, how do you start tithing? I wanted to give a practical example from my own testimony. Because when I first started coming to church, I was at a pretty low point in my life. Pretty low. I don't want to exaggerate, but I'm pretty sure lowest point in my life ever. And then I was brought here to a Wednesday night Bible study. And I heard Bishop for the first time, and I didn't really know who he was or what his background was, but I heard him for the first time. And I said, everything that's coming out of his mouth I agree with. And he has been teaching me for the last 10 years now. But I got to say that there's that first step, that first offering, and it burns. It burns. But when you think about 10%, that's crazy. I was broke at the time. I had things, like I had some property, without like selling everything, I didn't have any cash. So I was living check to check. I was getting paid on a certain date, paying my mortgage. See, now I'm feeling like now I got to contribute. How am I going to possibly contribute? I'm going to call the bank and say, hey, I'd love to pay the mortgage, but I really believe that God's calling me to tithe, and so I'm just not going to have it this month. See how far you get with that. By the way, they're not like the cable company. But don't think I haven't tried. So how do you start? How did I start? My budget is broken up into two categories on the expenses side, right? Two categories. I have discretionary and non-discretionary spending. Fancy word for stuff I really need and stuff I could probably live without. What do you really need in life? You need food, shelter, and love. That's it. Those are the only non-discretionary expenses. Everything else you can live without. You don't need internet service. You don't need cable. You don't need XM radio, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Go. You don't need any of those things. You could do without all of them. And you could do without a house phone, for the 5 people that still have house phones. But of all of the discretionary spending, of all the optional spending, the nice-to-have things that we don't really evaluate whether or not we really need them, of all of those things, if you're going to start giving, start with that. I started with that, and it worked for me. I added up all those things I could live without, and I don't remember what it was. Let's say it was $300 a month of all that stuff that you could probably do without. And I said, you know what? I'm going to tithe first on that amount of money, $30. And then I'm going to buy those things that are the nice-to-haves of life. And little by little, year after year, as the situation changes, you reevaluate your budget, you're able to do more, and you're able to do more and more. And by the time, around the time we were married, we had achieved a tithe. And it felt good. And it felt good. And I had no way to believe that I was ever going to get there when I started. It would have been, you couldn't have possibly convinced me that, because I shaved. I didn't have that many discretionary expenses. But there were some. And I started being loyal and obedient with that portion of my budget. And it grew from there. So I just want to encourage you. Because I know that there's a lot of shame that comes along with folks not feeling like they have anything to give. And we're going to do the offering in a minute. But if there's something that you feel you can or should be doing, I just want to encourage you. Pursue that. Pursue that conviction. And you know, for the folks that, let's say you have zero discretionary spending. You're just tapped out. You're spending on the bare minimum and that's it. You don't have it to give. I want you to raise your hand and take an envelope today when we do that. I want you to take an envelope anyway. I want you to have the experience of what it's like to put that in the basket because you do have something to give. You have your time. You have your value. You sitting here is value. You're adding value. You're speaking to people. You just carry value everywhere you go. So I want you to take an envelope today, and I want you to write on it a declaration, your declaration of independence about your value and where you want to be, where God sees you being financially. I want you to take that and then put that as your offering in the basket as it comes around. If you need an envelope, go ahead and raise your hand. The ushers will give one to you. And if you are putting in your tithe or offering and it's something that you're comfortable with and you do on a regular basis, I encourage you, write your declaration. Write it on the back of your envelope. Because there's always a next level. We're always striving. I know I went through that kind of quickly, but I'm going to ask the worship team to come back. As we worship here today, I want you to think about that quote from Archbishop William Temple. Think about all the areas of your life where we describe worship. And if you're ready, let's just pray over our offering. Lord Jesus, we're giving to you, in some cases, not out of abundance, but out of obedience. Lord, it's difficult, but we're all on a journey, and we're all in this together, and we know that you honor everything that we do. So I pray your blessing over this crowd here today, Lord, and those that are watching, that you will remove that shame and replace it with the value that you've put in each and every heart. We thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name. You may serve the people. Let's worship.
Light of the world, you stepped down into darkness, opened my eyes and let me see beauty that makes his heart adore you, hope of a life spent with you. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God, you're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You are lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful, wonderful. Here I am to worship, to bow down, oh, and say you're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, wonderful. I'll never know. And I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. Never know how much it costs to see my sin. Hey, I'll never know, I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin on the cross. I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. Here I am to worship, here I am to you're all. Here I am to worship, and here I am to bow down, here I am to say, you're my God, you're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful. faithful to me.
Thank you for the cross, Lord. Thank you for the price you paid, bearing all my sin and shame. In love you came and gave amazing grace. And thank you for this love, Lord. And thank you for the nail-pierced hand. And wash me in your cleansing flow. Now all I know, your forgiveness and embrace. Worthy is the Lamb seated on the throne. We crown you now with many crowns. You reign victorious. High and lifted up, Jesus, Son of God. The darling of heaven, crucified. Yeah. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb.
Sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great, sings my Savior God to lift it up, church, then sings. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art, how great thou art. How great thou art.
Just hang out. Chill. So we have a few more minutes. You know, part two. I said I wanted to talk about real value, and I was going to talk about real love. You could stand, sit. It's going to be quick. So we've established that we have value. But what about this thing like real love? What's that about? We talked about all the commands in the Bible. When Jesus was asked what's the greatest command, he reduced it to 2. Not 1, but 2. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. Why 2? See, because we have value. Each one of us has value. And you can't love God and not love God's creation. It's impossible. You can't separate those 2. You have to love we have to love each other. Otherwise, we're not obeying God. We can't love to say we love God, but then we get on Facebook and say something else. But then we get on Instagram and we repost these cutting remarks about each other. That's not love. We have to love one another. But what is real love? See, when we talk about bad things happening to good people, we talk about evil and things that are bad that happen to people. The interesting thing about that is that God gave us the ability to choose. He gave us the free will. That's a big point. We can't forget about that. Why would God give us the free will? I've had many people say, why couldn't God just create a world where we couldn't be evil? Why couldn't God just create a world where we would all be better, where these awful things would not happen? See, if you take free will out of the conversation, love goes with it. Why is that? See, if you really love someone, it's because you're choosing to love them. If someone were programmed to love you, would you feel loved? If someone was a robot and they were not capable of not loving you, they had to love you because it's just the way they've been programmed, would that be real love? Of course not. Of course not. Because real love requires we have the ability to choose. It requires that we have free will. Unfortunately, the wickedness of the human heart will cause people to choose sin. That's how it gets into the world. But the Christian message explains this. No other worldview explains this. There's a lot of worldviews that ignore the evil. Separate yourself from the desires so that you won't have them. Not the Christian worldview. No, our God says, I'm going to love you through it. I'm going to come down and become flesh, and I'm going to be right next to you while you go through what you're going through. That's the kind of love. And we're heading into the season where we celebrate that right now. We have Good Friday coming up, Easter season. That's what it's all about. God becoming humanity and being right next to us and loving us through these situations. That's real love. And I've heard an example story where if you look at a married couple exchanging vows, you can look at that and say, that's love. But you know, it really isn't. It's the promise of love. The vows are a promise of love. But 25 years later, after everything the world has to throw at you, it's been thrown, and you're still there, that's love. See, love has to have that choice. You have to make the decision to love. Otherwise, it's not real love. Jesus made the decision to love. On the cross, after being horribly beaten, what were the things that he was saying? Was he bitter and angry? He was saying, take care of her. Take care of my mother. He was saving the criminal. We'll live together in paradise. He was praying for the very people that wrongfully brought all of this on in his life. They forgive them. They know not what they do. That's love. That's the love that God's poured out. And that's the love we're going to celebrate in the Easter season. So I leave you with that thought. What is real love? Are we making the choice to love one another? Are we actively making that choice? Because God is not going to force us. We have to step into that. We have to make that choice. And you know, Bishop's been away and he's going to be back soon. And he loves this house. He loves this house so much that he will step back and allow God to do what God is going to do here. He will let people like me come up here and bring a message. And that's for a person in his position that has invested his life into this ministry. I want you to appreciate how difficult that is. But he loves this house. So much so that he's making that choice. And it's going to be great to have him back. He'll be back real soon. But I leave you with that. Make that choice to love. And identify what's real love in your life. I'm honored and I appreciate the time that you spent this morning listening. I hope that you take these concepts this week and continue to explore all the areas of your worship. Continue to understand what gives you value. And don't just keep it for yourself. Ask some people around you, why are you valuable? See what they tell you. Why should that not have happened to that person? Who are good people and what are bad things? Start the conversation leading up into Easter season. Spread the word. We're going to end with a praise song. After that, you're dismissed, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much. God bless you. Bryce?
Come on, church, stand on your feet. Come on. Staring into your eyes, sorry, makes my heart come to life. Suddenly brought to life when I met you. Come on, clap your hands. Reaching beyond the skies, running deep, stretched and wide. Perfect love realized here with you. That is love. Now this love is for real. You will never let go, never let go. Oh, more than just words, love beyond my control, out of control. Come on, church, let me see your hands up like this. Oh, this is real love. This is real love. Oh, this is real love. This is real love. Oh. Hey, you're pulling me closer and closer, holding my heart to the very end. Jesus, I'm found in your freedom. This is real love. This is real love. In your heart, I'm found. Oh, I want you. I want you. You won't let me down. Oh, you got me. You got me. What love is for real, you will never let go, never let go. Oh, there's more than just words, love beyond my control, out of control. Sing, this is real love, this is real love. Oh, this is real love, this is real love. 1, 2, you're pulling me. suddenly brought to life when I met you. 1, 2, 3, come on. Oh, this is real love. This is real love. Amazing love. Oh, this is real love. This is real love. 2, 3, jump.
Closer and closer, holding my heart to the very end. Jesus, I'm found in your freedom.
Oh, this is
real love.
this is.
This is real love. This is real love.
God bless you, church. We love you.